जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी जय यशोदानन्दना जय व्रजजनरञ्जना जय यशोदानन्दना जय व्रजजनरञ्जना जय यमुना तीरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय यमुना तीरवनचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधवा कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vallabha Radhe Jaya Radha Vallabha Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Shubhadra Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Shubhadra Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय निताई गौर प्रेमानंदे ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Hare Krishna. Today we are reading from Canto 5, Chapter 13. Chapter 13 is entitled Rahugana Converses with Jada Bharat. Today we are on text 20. Rahuganatvam yadvayosya Rahuganatvam hidvanosya Sanyastadanda kritabhuta maitraha Sanyasadanda kritabhuta maitraha Asajjitatma harisevayashitam Asajjitatma harisevayashitam Jnanasimadaya tarati param Jnanasimadaya tarati param Rahuganatvam hidvanosya Sanyastadanda kritabhuta maitraha Asajjitatma harisevayashitam Jnanasimadaya tarati param Rahuganatvam hidvanosya Sanyastadanda kritabhuta maitraha Asajjitatma harisevayashitam Jnanasimadaya tarati param Vaishnavis. Rahugana, O King Rahugana, Tvam, you, Api, also, he, certainly, Advanaha, of the path of material existence, Asya, this, Sanyasta Dandaha, having given up the king's rod for punishing criminals. Krita Bhuta Maitraha, having become friendly to everyone. Asajjita Atma, whose mind is not attracted to the material pleasure of life. Hari Sevaya, by the means of loving service to the Supreme Lord. Shitam, sharpened. Jnana Asim, the sword of knowledge. Adaya, taking in hand. Tara, crossover. Atiparam, to the ultimate end of spiritual existence. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. My dear King Rahugana, you are also a victim of the external energy, being situated on the path of attraction to material pleasure. So that you may become an equal friend to all living entities, I now advise you to give up your kingly position and the rod by which you punish criminals. Give up attraction to the sense objects and take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. Then you will be able to cut the hard knot of illusory energy and cross to the other side of the ocean of nescience. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna compares the material world to a tree of illusion from which one must cut oneself free. Na rupamasyeha tathopalabhyate nanto na chadir na cha sampratishtham ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam asanga shastrena dridena chitva tatha padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivartani bhuya tam eva chadyam purusham prapadye yata pravritti prashrita purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this tree with the weapon of detachment. So doing, one must seek that place from which, having once gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom everything has begun and whom everything is abiding since time immemorial. Bhagavad Gita chapter 15 verses 3 and 4. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtham Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayyam Dadati Swapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are seeing that the conversation between Maharaj Rahuguna and Jada Bharat is continuing over here. Even though Jada Bharat felt a little insulted, like he felt some dissatisfaction in his mind when Maharaj Rahuguna asked him to carry his palanquin first of all. And then, when he was carrying the palanquin, he chastised him for not carrying the palanquin properly. So he's such an exalted devotee, but at that time, obviously, Maharaj Rahuguna had not recognized his position. And he chastised him, assuming the title, role of a king. So Jada Bharat definitely felt a little insulted. He felt some dissatisfaction or some unrest in his mind that why is Maharaj Rahuguna treating me like this when actually I am innocent, I have not done anything. But keeping that dissatisfaction aside, being the great devotee that he is, like being because devotees are very compassionate and merciful. They keep their own insults or their own egos aside, but their greatest service is to just bring everyone closer to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And we saw that multiple times in Srila Prabhupada's example, in his own life example. Like so many times, reporters would challenge him. It was not that every time he would receive adoration and respect from everybody. Many times, he would go to a hall, devotees would organize a program, and he would go to a hall and it would be empty. There's hardly anybody who's come up. And devotees would feel very bad after that we tried, but maybe we didn't market the program enough. But Prabhupada, there was nobody. But Prabhupada never used to mind that. He used to still lecture with the same, power and potency which he would to a full house. So for us, sometimes if there's no one sitting, especially, during the strict COVID lockdown earlier this year or last year, it was quite hard to give Bhagavatam classes for speakers because only the recording Prabhuji would be sitting. Sometimes only one person is listening to the class and he would be attentively listening. But it was hard when you don't have an audience. It becomes hard because you don't have anybody to even see to give the class. You have to just look at the camera, hoping somebody is listening from somewhere. So it's very hard when an audience is not there. But for Srila Prabhupada, it never mattered. He used to tell the devotees, why are you all worried that no one came? Didn't you all see? There was Brahma was there, Narada was there, the demigods were there. They had all come to listen to the class. So Srila Prabhupada's enthusiasm never used to wane. For him, it was not about personal, adoration or too many people should be there. Only then I will give a class or only then I will preach about Krishna consciousness. For him, it did not matter at all. So that is because pure devotees are very, very merciful and compassionate. They just want the best of everybody. And that is what we are seeing in Jad Bharat's character over here. So even though he felt insulted, he did not take it personally, but he still showed compassion on Maharaj Rahuguna, and he sat down and he gave him these, instructions about how he's in the illusion of bodily concept of life and what is the solution for him to come out of this bodily concept of life. So, these are beautiful instructions which have been going on since quite some time in this canto. So this is the last chapter in this series. It's coming to an end. We are on 20th verse. I think there are 26 verses in this chapter. So the conversation is coming to an end, and that, brings us to the end of this pastime where Rahugana is there. Towards the end of this chapter, Maharaj Parikshit will ask more elaboration. He's saying, you explain this analogy to us between, the conversation of Jad Bharat and Rahuguna, where Jad Bharat is telling Rahuguna about this forest of material illusion. But just elaborate on that a little bit more. So the next chapter is, being an elaboration which Maharaj Parikshit is giving on this whole analogy which he gave about the forest of material illusion. And then he glorifies Bharat Maharaj towards the end, how, what a glorious life Bharat Maharaj led. So that is this whole, section is coming to an end. Now in today's verse, we are seeing that Jad Bharat is opening Maharaj Rahuguna's eyes to some harsh realities and truths. So a sadhu's duty, Jad Bharat is a devotee, is, a sadhu, and the sadhu's duty is always to cut. Sadhu means cutting. And what do they cut? They cut the knot of material attachment in the heart of the listener. So, and this is very nicely explained by Srila Prabhupada when Vidura comes to save Dhritarashtra. So in the same court where Vidura was insulted and he was driven away by Dhritarashtra's own son, Duryodhana, saying that, just who is this Sutaputra? Who, because obviously Vidura was trying to talk sense into Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra that stop this war, don't go ahead with this war, you should, just, give the Pandavas their fair share, don't be so mean to the Pandavas. So that time Duryodhana could not listen to this good counsel of Vidura. He in fact gets angry. So sometimes people who are very steeped in their own, in their own concept of what is right or what is wrong, or too much steeped in their own material enjoyment, they cannot agree to good counsel. They can get angry with the person who's actually trying to show them something. So he gets angry and he actually insults Vidura and drives him out of the court. He says that just leave with the breath that is there inside you, do not take anything and go out. So that is how, Vidura was saved from from participating in the war. He just went on a pilgrimage. He took that opportunity to go on a pilgrimage to different holy places. But after the war was over, Vidura, he had compassion for his brother, because Dhritarashtra did not say anything. Blinded that he was in Duryodhana's love, he did not stop Duryodhana from driving his own uncle away. He just kept quiet, like he kept quiet on so many other occasions. So he just kept quiet and allowed Duryodhana or allowed Vidura to get insulted by Duryodhana. But Vidura still did not take it personally. Like, here we see Jad Bharat did not take personally the insults of Maharaj Rahugana. He still came back after the war was over. Because after the war was over also, Dhritarashtra was so attached to Hastinapur, to that throne, that he was not even able to leave and go away. Although all his sons had died by the hands of the same people who are now on the throne. But still he was so attached that he kept staying in the kingdom. And Vidura uses very strong words. He's saying you're eating the remnants which are being thrown to you by your son's killers. So Vidura comes to save Dhritarashtra. He talks to Dhritarashtra. He shakes him up out of his reverie that, he was nicely sitting and enjoying in his old age also being served by the Pandavas. And he tells him that now is the time for you to go away. Just get detached and leave and go into the forest. And that time Dhritarashtra's, first time in life, Dhritarashtra's eyes opened to this knowledge which Vidura was imparting. And he left his home, he left the palace and he went away into the forest along with Gandhari. So we see the duty of a sadhu is always to cut this knot of material attachment. And that is what we see Jad Bharat doing over here. In this verse, he is using very strong words, if we see. So he's saying that... He is saying, my dear king, you are also a victim of the external energy being situated on the path of attraction to material pleasure. So for someone to tell the king like that, it requires a lot of courage. That you are you are a victim of material energy and you're just enjoying material pleasures in this world. But Jad Bharat is doing that because it's his duty. He thought he should save Maharaj Rahugana. But we see that he is doing it very affectionately. It is not that he is, just chastising and there's no affection in his heart or no love in his heart for Maharaj Rahugana. And that is evident from the fact that he is addressing him by his name. So the first one is Rahugana Tvamapi. He's addressing by his name, my dear King Rahugana. And generally we see that when someone is addressing someone by their name, it shows some element of affection and love in the heart of that person. For the other person. Otherwise, if someone is just giving general instructions, he will be preaching without giving any, bringing any personal touch. But Jad Bharat is still doing that. He is addressing Maharaj Rahugana by his name, which shows that he has still affection for Maharaj Rahugana, despite being insulted. In fact, Keshav Prabhu was telling us in our Bhakti Vaibhav class that, we should only correct or chastise someone when we have an authority with that person or when they accept your authority. Otherwise, generally, we should not correct. So, sometimes, we might see something wrong is happening or someone is not doing something correctly, let's say in devotional life. And we can definitely see that needs to be corrected. But we should never approach that person unless they are, we are in a position of some authority and they will accept our authority. Otherwise, do it through somebody else whose authority they accept. Because obviously, out of compassion, we want that person not to keep doing the wrong things that they are doing. But at the same time, if they are not going to accept our authority, then there's no point. So in this situation, Maharaj Rahugana has accepted the authority of Jad Bharat. He has made it amply clear, during this chapter and even in the earlier chapter, that I'm so sorry I did that. I'm now surrendering to you. You instruct me. So he has accepted the authority of Jad Bharat, and on that basis, Jad Bharat is actually giving these instructions. And another thing which, we hear senior devotees say is that when we do have to correct someone or we do have to chastise someone, it is very important that we also show love equally to that person after we've done that. Because sometimes we just, show the rod, like here it is saying, give up your rod of punishment. Sometimes, we might tend to go and correct someone. And sometimes, we might have to use some strong words. And after that, if we don't follow it up with some gesture of love and affection, then it can actually, hurt that person whom we are trying to correct. And it can become a Vaishnava aparadh. So it is extremely important that we show lot of love, profuse love and affection to someone whom we need to correct. And we don't just, think, oh, I can correct, this person is not doing properly, and then go away from there. So we see that, from Jad Bharat's example, we can learn that from his example, how he's addressing Maharaj Rahuguna so affectionately while giving him these strong instructions. So he is opening his eyes to some realities of life. And there are different aspects which Jad Bharat is touching upon in this conversation. So we'll go through those few aspects that he's touching on in his instructions to Maharaj Rahuguna here. So the first aspect he's telling Maharaj Rahuguna is that you are a victim of Maya and that you are on the path of material pleasure. You are still very attracted to sense enjoyment and sense gratification. So Prabhupada, I was listening to one Prabhupada's lecture while preparing for this class. And Prabhupada says that obviously these instructions of Jad Bharat to Maharaj Rahugana are for Rahugana as well, but they are for all of us. The whole Bhagavatam is for conditioned souls who are in this material world suffering the pangs of material misery. So they are applicable to all of us, just as Bhagavad Gita was being spoken to Arjuna, but it was applicable to everybody. So Prabhupada says that this whole material world, everybody is running after sense gratification. That is the principle of this material world. And Prabhupada compares this running of, people after sense gratification to actually running after a mirage in a desert. Prabhupada says sometimes some animals also get misled. Like when they are in a desert, everyone's throat is parched and someone's looking for water. And because of the effect of sun on the sand, people think there's a water body and they run to it, but there's no water there. But then they can see it in the distance. So like that, people are just pursuing this mirage and ultimately they die of this thirst without realizing that there is no water in this desert of material existence. So Srila Prabhupada was using very strong words. He was saying that, ultimately people meet with their end because they are not able to find that satisfaction. So we try to satisfy our senses. We keep trying for sense gratification, but we are actually attempting to do it in this world which is Dukkhalayam Ashasvatam. Krishna has stamped it. It is full of miseries and it is temporary. But still there we are trying to, look for these few drops of sense gratification which actually don't exist at all. So Prabhupada again in that lecture was using quite heavy words while talking about this mirage of sense gratification. He was saying that, we see Grahamedhis and most of the people in this material world are like that. So they have a nice apartment. They have, mortgage is paid off. So they have a nice apartment. They have a nice, beautiful wife. Some bank balance is there, children are there, they have two children, 3 children, whatever, and they are very satisfied with what they have. They do not think that, this is not my world or this is not my all in all. I have to come out of this particular, entrapment that I'm in. So Prabhupada says, don't be satisfied just because you have a nice house, nice wife, nice children, some bank balance is there. That is not the end in all for people. In fact, we see Prahlad Maharaj's instructions in the 7th canto, beautiful instructions when he's talking to Hiranyakashipu. So Hiranyakashipu twice took Prahlad Maharaj on his lap. The first time he took him on his lap, Prahlad Maharaj spoke some verses which were completely devotional in nature. And then Hiranyakashipu angrily chastised Shanda and Amarka. And he said, go and take this child away and teach him the affairs of politics, economics. Go and teach him how to rule a kingdom, how to become a demon king. So they take Prahlad Maharaj away and they ask him, where have you learnt all this? Because we did not teach you all these things. And Prahlad Maharaj, they realize that obviously he has been born with these devotional qualities. He heard the whole Bhagavatam from Narad Muni while he was in the womb of Kayadu. And then Prahlad Maharaj is quiet. They think they have sufficiently taught him for a few weeks. And they again present him nicely. And it said, Kayadu dressed him very nicely and they again present him before his demoniac father. And once again he takes him on his lap and he asks him, what did you learn? And Prahlad Maharaj starts with the famous verse of, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. So we see Prahlad Maharaj is very, he is not afraid that his father is a demon. He might chastise him or he might even get him killed. He is just saying the truth which exists in his heart. So over there, Prahlad Maharaj is giving very beautiful pastimes. Very beautiful instructions. He is saying, Matirna Krishne Paratasvatova Mitho Bipadyeta Graha Vritanam Adanta gobir vishatam tamishram puna puna charvitas charvitanam. So this is a nice instruction. There are so many beautiful instructions, but this is a nice verse in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, where he's saying that puna puna charvitas charvitanam, that everybody in this material world is a victim, like Jad Bharat is telling Maharaj Rahugana. Everybody is a victim of Maya and everyone is running after sense gratification. But puna puna charvitas charvitanam, they are simply chewing, rechewing, they're chewed, trying to get pleasure where it's not existing. Like, in India we see, Prabhupada gives the example, when sugarcane juice is being extracted. So the person puts his once, you get some nice juice. He puts his second time, you get some more, little bit juice. And then he keeps putting it again and again, trying to extract those few drops of juice that are existing. So that is what he's saying. Prahlad Maharaj is saying, everyone's trying to chew the chewed. Like, now COVID is there, so I don't know if it's still there, but we know these restaurant tram cars, which we see running on the streets of Melbourne. Like we see one going towards on that 12 number tram track from Mill Street. And whenever I look at that tram, I think, this is just chewing the chewed. There are restaurants existing. There are so many nice places, so-called nice places according to these materialists to eat. However, that is also not giving them satisfaction. So they now want a moving place, like inside a tram they want to sit and enjoy that same eating, just trying to derive some pleasure from this experience. So, that is what Prahlad Maharaj is saying, puna puna charvitas charvitanam. Everyone is entrapped and everyone is trying to just extract that little water in the desert of material enjoyment. And that is because Jiva has forgotten his real eternal position. Why, like we know this, why we are doing this? Why are people trying to do? Because they have forgotten their real eternal position of being part and parcel of Krishna, and their, what is their dharma. The dharma of the soul is to serve Krishna. They have forgotten that. In fact, in his instructions to Sanatan Goswami, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is, saying a beautiful verse. He is saying, Krishna bhuliya jiva bhoga vancha kare, pasete maya tare jhapatiya dhare. Krishna bhuliya jiva bhoga vancha kare. Forgetting Krishna, Jiva is trying to bhoga vancha. He is trying to enjoy sense gratification. He is trying to this bhogam. He is trying to enjoy. But what happens because of that? Maya jhapatiya dhare. When Maya sees, she is that, faithful servant of Lord Krishna who's just standing there to see which people are doing this. And as soon as they see that she sees Jiva has forgotten and turned his back towards Krishna, she jhapatiya dhare. She entraps that Jiva into the three modes of material nature. And we see, in the third canto, when Kapila Dev is instructed, and before that also, there is this whole description of a child in the womb of the mother. And the child actually, when the child is in the womb of the mother in that miserable condition, because obviously the child is cramped inside that little womb, for 9 months he has to stay there, he or she has to stay there. And whatever the mother is eating, drinking, Prabhupada says, not every mother is very careful. They eat spicy food, sour food. Whatever they are eating, the child has to suffer the reactions of that food which the mother puts. And in his own stool, because he also starts poo, she passes stool, urine. So in that own stool and urine, the child is there in that, womb of the mother. And in that miserable condition, actually the child prays to the Lord, to Paramatma. He says that, please take me out of this miserable condition. I promise you, I just want to serve you. That is what the child continuously prays while he is in the womb. But what happens? Does every child who come out is a devotee? We don't see that, because as soon as the child comes out, like Maya Jhapatiya Dhare, he gets covered by the three modes of material nature, and he forgets Jiva Bhuliya. He forgets his eternal position, that he was praying like this and he's an eternal servant of Krishna. In fact, in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, also Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there is a beautiful verse which says, Krishna Bhuli Jiva Anadi Bahir Mukha Ata Eva Maya Tare Diya Samsara Sukha. Forgetting Krishna, the living entity has been attracted by the external creature from time memorial, and therefore Maya gives him all kinds of miseries in this world. So Maya is standing, Maya Devi or Durga is standing with the Trishul, and she is inflicting tapatraya. Tapatraya is the threefold miseries on the jiva. The Adi Bhuta, Adi Bhautik, Adi Adhyatmik and Adi Daivik miseries. Her role is to keep inflicting these miseries on a jiva who has Bahir Mukha, who has turned his back to Krishna. So that is the first thing which Jada Bharat is opening Maharaj Rahugana's eyes to. He's saying that you are a victim of external energy, and because you are situated on the path of attraction in this material pleasure. And then further Jada Bharat is talking to Rahugana, and he's saying the second instruction. So in the first instruction, he's opening Maharaj Rahugana's eyes. He's making him recognize or realize the reality of life, that you are a victim of Maya. So in a class I was hearing, like, there are 3 R's. So the first R is recognition, the second R is remorse, and the third R is rectification. So the first thing to do is recognize your fallen condition. The problem with 99% of the population of this world is no one is recognizing their fallen condition. They are not recognizing only that, there is a spiritual world, this is a material world, I am suffering the pangs of material miseries because I have forgotten my relationship with Krishna. Obviously, that recognition itself is not there. So the first step in devotional life is to recognize the fallen condition, and that is what is the first step Jada Bharat is following over here. He is making Maharaj Rahugana recognize that you are a victim of Maya. You are entrapped in this material sense enjoyment. You are entrapped in this upadhi of being a king. So he's making him recognize these realities of life. And once you recognize, it's just not enough. Oh yeah, I understand I am the spirit soul, or I understand this material world is dukhalayam ashasvatam. So after recognition, the second stage should be remorse. Remorse is, yes, because of my own misdoings or my own karma, I have become entrapped like this. Or because of my own lack of determination, I'm not able to surrender to Krishna. And therefore, I need to do something about it. That remorse is there, where, the guilt is there, that it's because of me that I'm suffering, and what can I do now to rectify this situation? So that remorse was expressed by Maharaj Rahugana. He expresses to Jada Bharat, I'm sorry I treated you like that. I recognize you are a great Mahan. And therefore, you please tell me some instructions on what I should do. So he has expressed that remorse. And then we are seeing Jada Bharat actually offering him rectification. Not only he is opening his eyes to reality, but he is also giving him a solution. That now what should you do to not be a victim of Maya and to stop this sense gratification. So these 3 R's, as a devotee also, it's very important for us that in any interaction also with others, we keep this in mind. Recognize if we have made, for example, we have offended a devotee, and then obviously remorse. Go and, say sorry, or at least in our heart we are feeling very bad that I shouldn't have offended this devotee like this. And then rectification means actually positive action. Because if you just keep doing remorse, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have offended, but after that there's no action, then also that remorse is useless. That recognition and remorse is useless. So rectification is when we actually are taking a positive step to then go and serve that devotee in some way, to apologize first and then serve, render some service, so that that offense we have done is negated. So now he is offering a solution to rectify the problem. He is saying the first solution he is offering is give up this kingly position, this rod, and give up this rod of punishment that you use for punishing criminals. Because the duty of a Kshatriya is actually to maintain law and order in their state. So therefore the king sometimes has to mete out some harsh punishments to criminals. Sometimes some people have to be beaten, some people have to be jailed, some have to be hanged if they have done something heinous. So he is saying give up this title of king. That is the first instruction he is giving to rectify the problem. So Jada Bharat is saying that this upadhi of king, that is the first thing you need to give up. And we all are trapped again, in this cycle of upadhis. So many upadhis we acquire soon as we come in this world. The first upadhi we acquire is I am the body. That is the first upadhi we acquire. On top of that, we say that, I am a man or a woman, I'm a child. On top of that, our association is based on our place of birth. I am an Indian, I'm an Australian, I'm a Fijian, I'm American. So, and then obviously, once somebody starts working, especially in corporate life, so much of these upadhis, I'm this, I'm that, I'm a manager, I'm an executive, I'm an EGM, I'm vice president, I'm president, I'm the director, CEO. So many upadhis are there. And you cover ourselves with all these upadhis, and we are just identifying with these upadhis without realizing that actually we have to give up these upadhis. And there are others. This material world is, full of envy. So there are others who are actually waiting enviously and eagerly to take that upadhi away from someone. So we see as soon as in corporate life also, one manager is there, but somebody is below him. It happened in my office. There was one manager who was just removed last year because of something which, happened. And the person who was actually below him, obviously he was happy because then he got to take up the role. Very subtly and slowly he took up the roles, and obviously he was doing well, but he took up that role. So he then took up that upadhi. So everyone is eagerly waiting to get each other's upadhis. That is the reality of this material world. However, we see, sarvopadir vimir mukta. So we see that we have to give up all these upadhis which are there in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It talks about this. Become free from all these upadhis. That is the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because even in spiritual life, upadhis, sometimes we get attached to the upadhis. I am the go-to man for my Guru Maharaj. When he comes, everybody has to take appointment through me. Or I am commander, I am this, I am that, I am a book distributor. So sometimes, instead of being attached to the act of service, we become attached to the service itself. And then we don't want to give up because that upadhi, sticks with us. I'm pujari, I'm this, that. And therefore, Prabhupada says, be very attached to the act of serving, not to the service itself. Because then we can create, these false upadhis in our mind, even in devotional service. So, sarvapadir vimnir muktam, tat paratvena nirmalam. And, give up these upadhis and be engaged, rishikena rishike. So, be engaged in the master of the senses so that you can become free from these upadhis. So, that is what we are seeing. Again, Jadbhara telling Maharaj Raghuguna, give up your kingly position and give up this rod of punishment that you have. And we see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows that by example that, because kings are attached to their positions normally, he did not want to even associate with Maharaj Prataparudra. He was saying that, no, they are very materialistic people and I want to keep away. So there were so many tricks which devotees were trying because Maharaj Prataparudra was not the normal king. He was a very devoted king. So many tricks the devotees were trying, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was completely saying, no, I don't want to associate. That is because he was showing by example that when somebody has a high position, they become very attached to that position and they like to enjoy the benefits which that position brings. And in terms of the king, they have so much opulence to enjoy. So therefore, give up all these upadhis and engage in rishikena rishike. So sevanam bhakti ruchyate. Engage in the service of the master of the senses. So that is the second aspect. The next aspect which Jadbharat is talking to Maharaj Raghuguna, he is saying give up attraction to the sense objects and take up the sword of knowledge sharpened by devotional service. So he is saying that give up this attraction to sense objects. And Srila Prabhupada is elaborating on that particular aspect in his purport. Prabhupada is quoting Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, the banyan tree example. Prabhupada is quoting. So Prabhupada, we know from chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita, we know that there is this imperishable banyan tree, which is actually existing in the spiritual world, but its perverted reflection is there in this material world, where the roots are, because it's a reflection, obviously, the roots are upwards and the branches and everything are below. They are down. It's ulta. The tree is ulta. So Prabhupada is talking about this tree in his purport. And Prabhupada says in the purport to that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, he says that the basic principle of devotional service is obviously detachment from sense gratification and attachment to the devotional service of the Lord. That is the basic principle of devotional service, how to become detached from sense gratification. So since the tree in the material world is a perverted reflection, it's an illusory tree, Srila Prabhupada is saying that cut off this attachment to this illusory tree using the sword of knowledge and become situated in the real tree. That is what Prabhupada is elaborating on in the purport. So cutting off the attachment to sense gratification is extremely hard. We all know, we are all struggling because anartha nivriti, like the 9 stages of devotional service, bhajana, kriya, sadhu sangha, the anartha nivriti stage sometimes takes millions and millions of lifetimes. Because it is so hard for everyone to give up their attachment to this material world. Attachment to the body, attachment to the family, attachment to the place of birth, attachment to so many things. It's extremely hard. And we have been, enjoying our senses for millions of years. So that, has added a thick coating on the soul. So very hard for us to cut off all these attachments. So we are trapped in this jail. Actually this durg or jail, we are trapped inside this. And it's a jail which has no doors. We can actually walk out of this, concept that we are trapped. We have trapped ourselves in any time. There's no doors. There's no windows. We can walk out. There's no lock. It's a jail which has no lock. However, the problem is we have chosen to stay in this jail. And what is keeping us in this jail is the reflecting surface, which is the reflection of the real world, of the real tree and the illusory tree. That reflecting surface is desires. Prabhupada says that it is our desire for sense gratification which is keeping us in this jail. In fact, we've mentioned this before as well. There is a beautiful conversation between Janak Maharaj and Ashtavakra. Once Ashtavakra comes to visit Janak Maharaj, and Janak Maharaj wanted to drive home a point. So Janak Maharaj was in his courtyard and he was hugging a tree. And he was hugging the tree and he was as if he is wrestling with the tree, he's continuously telling the tree, leave me, leave me, leave me. And Ashtavakra was very intrigued to see this scene. Because Janak Maharaj is one of the Mahajans. So he was very intrigued and he was asking Janak Maharaj, you are holding the tree and you are telling, leave me, leave me. The tree is not holding you. And that time Janak Maharaj explained. He said that yes, that is the condition of everyone in this world. We are holding on to, this desire for sense enjoyment. We are not leaving it. Actually, at any point in time, we can leave this desire for, we can go out of this material world. It doesn't have any doors or windows. However, we are holding tight onto this and we are not able to cut off, like Srila Prabhupada is saying, cut off this, tree of illusion and be situated in the real tree. So how do we do this? Prabhupada is explaining, you do it with the sword of sharpened, the sword which has been sharpened by devotional service, the sword of knowledge which has been sharpened by devotional service. So if we use a blunt sword, it takes, long time to cut the tree. Obviously, if the sword is blunt, and therefore Prabhupada says sharpened sword. So, we see like in India, when you go to these traditional barber shops and all, you see they use a stone to sharpen their blades or knives. And I don't know if that trade still exists, but in my younger days, people like those vendors used to come on a bicycle and to sharpen knives, and they would shout out and my mother would take some knives and get them sharpened. So it was like a rotating stone on which, they would sharpen the knife and give. So Prabhupada is saying that stone for us is the stone of knowledge and devotional service. So that is how we sharpen this sword. Otherwise, with a blunt sword, we will keep attempting and we will keep doing it for years. We'll be still entrapped in this tree, this illusory tree. So Prabhupada is saying, sharpen the sword with with knowledge of devotional service and executing devotional service, and then you will be able to cut this tree very quickly. So these knots, there's a nice verse in the Uddhava Gita, when Krishna is instructing, we are studying that, we have just finished studying that section in our Bhaktivedanta course, where Krishna is telling, Vidyate Hridaya Granthi Chridyante Sarva Samshayaha. So Vidyate Hridaya Granthim. So this heart knot of material attachment which is there in our heart is because of sarva samshaya, because we have doubts. We have doubts and misgivings or anarthas. And the first misgiving is that I am the enjoyer. We do not recognize Krishna as the supreme cause of all causes, as the enjoyer, supreme enjoyer, as the bhoktaram yagyatapasam. We do not recognize that position of Krishna. We think we are the enjoyers, and because of that these samshaya, we are not able to cut this knot of material attachment. And that is why Srila Prabhupada is saying that sharpen the sword with devotional service and you'll be able to cut this knot off. Now there are two types of people who are not able to cut this knot off. The first type of person is the person who's a materialist, very deeply engrossed in sense enjoyment. He actually loves to be in this tree, because in the 15th chapter again, Prabhupada explains what do the branches and the leaves and the twigs and all that represent in this tree. And he's deeply absorbed. He's just, nicely going from one branch to the other branch and very nicely enjoying this illusory banyan tree, thinking he's enjoying. So because of his deep entrenchment in this illusory banyan tree, he has no interest in finding out what is the root of this banyan tree. He has no interest of cutting off this banyan tree and being situated in his real position, in the real banyan tree, which is the roots of that banyan tree are the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. He is not interested in doing that at all. So these are gross materialists who are not interested in cutting down this tree. And the second type of people who are not interested in cutting down this tree are the impersonalists. So the impersonalists are actually very detached. They are fed up. They have recognized that this material world is full of miseries. And I don't want anything to do with this tree of material enjoyment or this tree of this material world. So they have come to that stage where they are already detached. However, they have become so fed up. And because they do not have the sword of devotional service, their sword is not sharpened because they don't render devotional service to the Supreme Lord, they are not able to cut off this tree. So they don't want anything to do with any tree. Because they are fed up, they don't want anything to do with the real tree also. So they are detached, but they are not able to go and get themselves attached to the lotus feet of Krishna. They have no interest in finding out. And that is, the second category who are not able to cut off this tree and be situated in the real tree. So gross materialists, it's hard for them because they are absorbed in this banyan tree and enjoying the so-called pleasures of this banyan tree. And the impersonalists who are fed up of the banyan tree, but they are not seeking the real banyan tree. So only devotees have that weapon. Like, because of Srila Prabhupada has created this movement, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to propagate about devotional service. Devotees have that weapon of devotional service. They have that weapon by which they can sharpen their intelligence, they can acquire the knowledge, and they can situate themselves at the lotus feet of Krishna. And that weapon, of knowledge, in fact, Krishna says in the 10th canto, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena maam upayanti te. So devotees who are engaged in discussing spiritual topics, Tushyanti cha ramanti cha, he further says that also, who are engaged in discussing devotional topics with each other, to them I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. So people who are engaged, who render some devotional service, who are engaged in discussing Krishna's pastimes, the Lord himself gives them the intelligence by which they can then cut off this tree. So the Lord is very eager to help the devotee who then, engages in all these activities. So therefore, it is very important that we sharpen, our knowledge, sharpening the sword with knowledge and with devotional service. And therefore, it's, Prabhupada also says and Krishna says that by studying how is the intelligence sharpened, by which we can actually then cut off this tree. The intelligence is sharpened by studying the Shastras or studying the scriptures. That word asanga shastrena is very important in the Bhagavad Gita verse which Prabhupada quotes over here. Asanga shastrena means with, shastra means weapon. So with the weapon of detachment, with the weapon of knowledge and devotional service, one can cut off their attachment to this material illusory tree. And therefore we are very lucky in Melbourne Mahaprabhu Mandir. So Prabhupada started, Prabhupada wanted these courses, study courses, scriptural study courses like Bhakti Shastri, Bhakti Vaibhav, Bhaktivedanta, Bhakti Sarvabhauma. Prabhupada wanted exams to be conducted. And we are so fortunate in our Melbourne temple, we have these courses so actively running. It gives a platform, it gives an opportunity to all devotees to come together and in a group discuss these pastimes or discuss these instructions of Lord Krishna with each other. Because by doing this systematic study of the Shastras, our intelligence gets sharpened, especially studying it in the association of devotees. The intelligence gets sharpened, because of which we are then able to have that weapon to cut off this illusory tree. So attachment cannot be eradicated. We know it's very hard. We are talking about, getting detached from this world and getting attached to the real banyan tree. So attachment to this, attachment is the nature of the soul and it cannot be eradicated. And because of that, what do devotees do? They transfer that attachment. They transfer that attachment to the Lord and to the Lord's devotees. So, again, beautiful verse in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, which says Prasangam ajaram pasam, atmana kavayo viduhu. So Prasangam ajaram pasam, that learned people, learned devotees know that it is hard to give up this attachment to this material world, and therefore what they do is they transfer their attachment to devotees of the Lord, and that opens the door to liberation. So that is what devotees are aware of. So devotees not only try to detach themselves, like impersonalists are also detached from this tree, but devotees take that next step which impersonalists don't take. They actually transfer their attachment to the devotees of the Lord. And because of that, it opens the door for them to be then resituated in the real tree at the lotus feet of Krishna. So association of devotees, in fact in Kali Yuga it is said that, we say that the Yuga Dharma is chanting of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. However, the Yuga Dharma for Kali Yuga is actually association of devotees. Because if we have the Mahamantra and we are not associating with devotees, we are trying to do our sadhana ourselves, we are definitely have the tendency to fall down. And we see that in Bharat Maharaj's example himself. He was doing devotional service, he was on the platform of bhava, but still he fell down from there because he was doing it alone. There were no devotees around him to chastise him that you're getting attached to the deer, take care, you have to get detached. If there were devotees around, they would have chastised him when they saw Bharat Maharaj getting so attached, overly attached to the deer. So he was doing his sadhana alone. So in the same way, if we are, we have this weapon of Hare Krishna Mahamantra, but we are doing it alone, without the association of devotees, it will not sustain over a period of time. However, if we keep ourselves in the association of devotees, they will give us the mantra and they will encourage us to keep chanting in their association. So learn it, this verse in the Bhagavatam is very important, where Kapila Deva is speaking this verse, Prasangam ajaram pasam, atmano kavayo vidu. Saeva sadhu sukrito moksha dwaram apavritam. He is saying that learned people therefore transfer their attachment to devotees. And that is how they are able to then open the doors of liberation. In fact, there is a nice pastime in Ramanujacharya's pastime in life, I think whose appearance day we celebrated a few days ago. So once, he was sitting and they were discussing about some pastimes of Lord Vishnu, of Ranganathan. And that time there was a festival. So the festival, Utsava Murti of, the Lord was being carried in a palanquin with a procession. Like, everyone was singing, dancing, chanting the holy names. And there was a procession. And while, these discussions were happening, obviously, because this procession passed, they had to stop that discussion and they had to, look at the procession, pay obeisances, whatever. So that procession disturbed or distracted them from continuing their discussion on the pastimes. And that time Ramanujacharya said, he said that, why this procession came? It actually was a hindrance to our discussion of the Lord's pastimes. And some people might take this wrongly, that, it was the Lord's procession only. Then why Ramanujacharya is saying like this? But in fact, even the Lord then says later, he says that I want to be in that discussion with Ramanujacharya is having with all the devotees, where he's, discussing my pastimes and glorifying my pastimes. So the Lord actually is present when we are chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra nicely, and when we are discussing the Lord's pastimes, he actually likes to come and listen. So same like, the story of how Lord Jagannath got this form. His, Rohini was discussing or narrating the whole childhood Lila of Krishna and Balaram to all the queens. And the Lord was so eager to hear these pastimes that he stood outside the door listening very secretly. And he went into ecstasy and we got this beautiful form of Jagannath. So the Lord is always eager to be in that assembly where his pastimes are being discussed. And that is what Ramanujacharya was establishing through that, pastime which he said that why this procession had to come. It disturbed the discussion of the Lord's glories. So devotees are aware that not only, become detached from this material world, but also get attached to the real tree in the spiritual world. You need the association of devotees. And that is what will then take them to the next step of being attached to the spiritual world. And that is what we see over here. The final instruction which Jad Bharat is giving to Maharaj Raghuguna. He's saying, then you will be able to cut the hard knot of illusory energy and cross to the other side of the ocean of nescience. So devotees realize that, we have to in order to cross to this other side of nescience, we need this association of devotees, and we need to give up this sense enjoyment tendency that we have. And many people we see have this tendency of sense enjoyment on two levels. One is the gross level and one is the subtle level. So on the gross level, people are trying to enjoy their senses, and the greatest enjoyment that they derive, or the pinnacle for them, is sex desire or sex enjoyment. So that is gross bodily identification, where they feel I am the enjoyer. This particular activity is meant for my pleasure. So that is the gross manifestation of this, bodily platform which they are on to enjoy. And some who are beyond that, they have this subtle enjoying tendency of the soul, which is puja and pratishtha. So puja, pratishtha, adoration. In fact, Bhaktivedanta Thakur says that the last thing, or the most difficult thing for a person to give up, for a soul to give up when he wants to escape this material world, is pratishtha, or the desire for adoration. The desire that everybody pays, obeisances to my lotus feet rather than Krishna's lotus feet. So that is, these two desires, or these two gross and subtle manifestations of the soul's desire to be the enjoyer, it keeps them in this material world. And it keeps us in this sick condition of life. So for example, when we are very sick, I remember once I had a flu, very severe flu 2 years ago or something like that, and your whole taste goes away. You don't feel like eating, the taste of the tongue is completely gone. And at that time, if you sit near someone and you see they are eating food nicely, you actually wonder how they are enjoying. You feel like vomiting when you see that food, because you are in the sick condition of mind. Because of all these enjoyment tendencies that we have, we are in the sick condition. And we can only come out of this sick condition, like we said, prasangamajaram, by the association of devotees. Through the association of devotees, slowly this gross enjoyment tendency and this subtle enjoyment tendency will go away, and we'll be able to cross to the other side, to cross the ocean of nescience. It becomes like the hoof print of a calf, like it said in the Nectar of Devotion, by taking up devotional service. So these are some of the instructions which Jadbharat is giving to Maharaj Rahugana in this particular verse, and the main theme is about cutting off this illusory tree of attachment by using the sharpened sword of knowledge, like studying the Shastras, and also situating ourselves in devotional service in the association of devotees. So we'll end the class here. Any comments, corrections, questions?
Thank you. So how do we use the preaching? The preaching is the essence, as Prabhupada says, in our regular practicing life, so we can share the knowledge. Is that part of our life, or is that part of our sadhana?
So, sorry Prabhu, your question is that after we study the Shastras, how do we, because preaching is the essence, Prabhupada says, so how do we, is that part of sadhana to preach?
Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji, definitely. And you're a big example of that. I know how much on Harinams you go and you preach the holy names to others. But yes, Prabhupada says that, how we have sometimes Kapoor and Sons or Chauhan and Sons or whatever, and it's their family business. When it says sons means, the father did, grandfather did, father did, the children are doing, carrying on the business. So Prabhupada says like that, the business, ISKCON business is to preach. And everybody, like we are all children of Prabhupada, so it is all our duty to assist Srila Prabhupada in this business of preaching. So definitely, like if we are just sitting and, studying the scriptures without, so we are taking Gyan, but the Vigyan is realization that I have to go and, preach. So if we are not dovetailing our, the Shastras that we've studied and the knowledge that we've acquired through Srila Prabhupada's books, and then to bring others to the platform of devotional service, then obviously studying those scriptures and all that is not going to carry us far. So definitely it's part of our sadhana that, we preach, either we directly preach, like, conduct Bhakti Vriksha programs or preaching programs, invite people to our house and preach, or go on Harinams through book. There's so many ways to preach, through book distribution. Or if we cannot directly do these services, assist devotees who are then engaged in these services, like cooking for a program, or, if a devotee wants to go on book distribution, taking up some service in the temple, which that devotee then can get relieved of. So there are so many direct and indirect ways of preaching, but yes, we have to assist, because that was Prabhupada's mood. This is a Goshti Anandi movement. This is not a Bhajan Anandi movement. So Prabhupada's mood was to reclaim as many conditioned souls and take them to the lotus feet of Krishna. And we assist Srila Prabhupada in that business.
Thank you, Mother. Now there is one nice verse in the 10th canto by Brahmaji. Ye anye ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavad avishuddha buddhaya aruya kritrena param padam tata patantyado anadrita yushmadangraja. So he talks about that anybody who tries to fulfill their desires by not going to Krishna is of avashuddha buddhaya. He's got contaminated intelligence. And one may even attain the highest position of liberation from the material entanglement, which is being proposed here in this verse, but they fall down because of anadrita yushmadangraja, because they are disrespectful or indifferent to the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna Chandra. So the question is, could you please qualify what kind of knowledge is being spoken about here that has to be sharpened by devotional service? Because certainly these people who become liberated from material entanglement altogether still fall down despite their knowledge of how to get free. So kindly, if you think the question is valid, could you qualify what kind of knowledge is being spoken of here? Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Those are beautiful verses you've quoted. So, like we were mentioning, I'm sure you know the answer to your own question, but like we were mentioning, and Prabhupada has elaborated on this in the Bhagavad Gita as well, that the knowledge that we are talking about is the knowledge of devotional service. And therefore we dwell more on the Bhakti Shastras. So we see that, like impersonalists we spoke about, they are not able to cut off this banyan tree. So they have knowledge. They have the knowledge that they have to be detached. They have the knowledge that this material world is an illusion. It's not a permanent place to reside in. So definitely they have that knowledge, and that knowledge they have acquired from obviously different Vedas and scriptures that they study. However, the knowledge that we are referring, or Jad Bharat is referring, and which Prabhupada elaborates on, is Bhakti Shastras, the knowledge of the Bhakti Shastras. And therefore, that is what, Prabhupada wanted us to study, and Melbourne Temple is facilitating, is study of the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita and all that. Because when we are sharpening our intelligence by studying knowledge of Bhakti Shastras or knowledge of devotional service, then not only we'll get detached from this world, which obviously transcendentalists and impersonalists are able to do. In fact, sometimes when you listen to some of their lectures, like, if you listen to some yogis, or, you listen to Satguru, for example, their concept of detachment is much stronger and higher than what devotees will. I generally feel I'm struggling so much still, in this material world, but their sadhana and their detachment is so strong. However, the problem is they are lacking that aspect of devotional service, the knowledge of devotional service. So that is extremely important, which, then separates us, or that is the distinction between impersonalists and devotees, that it might look we are struggling more than them in terms of our attachment to this material world, but we are situated on the right path because we are on the knowledge, through the knowledge of devotional service, we know the goal is to achieve the lotus feet of Krishna, not just to become strong in our austerities or detachment from this world. So that is what is the knowledge being referred here, Prabhuji. Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll end the class here. Granth Raj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada.